My name is Evan, and I'm 28. After my divorce, I moved to Chadam, a small town in Alabama. With no place else to go but my parents' house, I ended up living in my grandfather's old home. He passed away a few years back and left the property to us. It's about 10 minutes outside town, set on 10 acres with woods all around. It was really quiet out there, which I thought I'd like. The house was old, creaky wood floors, sticky doors, and always feeling cold, no matter how high the thermostat went. But it was free, and I didn't have a better option. The first few nights were normal. I unpacked, cleaned, and spent evenings on the porch with a beer. It was peaceful. No traffic, just wind through the trees and the occasional owl. Then the noises started. The first time I heard it was on the 7th night. Around midnight, as I was almost asleep, I heard whistling outside. It wasn't a song I knew, just a slow, off-key tune. It sounded like someone walking through the woods behind the house, whistling as they went. It freaked me out, but I figured it was a hunter or a drunk neighbor. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tune, but closer this time. I got out of bed, turned on the porch light, but saw no one. I went outside with a flashlight and checked the yard. Nothing, no tracks, no signs of anyone running off. Just the whistling fading deeper into the woods. I tried to ignore it. For a few nights I stayed in bed and tried to sleep through it, but the whistling always started around 1:17 a.m. I know it sounds random, but I swear it was always around then. It was like clockwork. I started thinking someone was messing with me on purpose, someone who knew I was out there alone. A few days later, I called the sheriff's office. An old deputy, let's call him Deputy H, came out. He'd been on the job for ages. When I told him what was happening, he got quiet. He said, word for word, "Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling around the property late at night, always in the spring. We never found anything. I figured he was just getting old, but now you're hearing it too." That shook me. I had no idea my grandfather dealt with this. Deputy H told me to keep the doors locked and stay inside after dark. I started doing that, double-checking every window. One night I even put chairs under the doorknobs, but the whistling kept getting closer every night. One night I heard it behind the shed, louder than usual, like someone was standing right outside. I grabbed my flashlight and looked through the blinds but saw no one. I didn't dare go outside. The next night, I heard it from the front porch, right by the door. 3 long whistles, then silence. The night after that, it came from under the floorboards. I swear it was like someone was in the crawl space whistling up through the vents. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I dug through the attic looking for anything my grandfather left behind. I found a box of his journals. He wrote about the whistling, said it happened every spring for over 10 years. He didn't know who it was, but thought someone was watching the house. He said he used to sit up with a rifle by the front door just in case. He said it only ever happened when he lived alone after my grandmother died. I called Deputy H again. He came by, read the journal, and looked nervous. He told me to be careful, and word for word, don't open the door if you don't know who it is. That night, I stayed up. I sat on the couch with a shotgun across my lap, one I barely knew how to load. I waited. At 1:17 a.m., the whistling started again, but this time it wasn't outside. It was in the hallway inside the house. I froze. The hallway light was off. I could hear the whistling moving closer, step by step. I stood up, aimed the shotgun, and shouted, "Who's there?" The whistling stopped. I flipped the light on. Nothing was there. No one. I didn't sleep after that. For 2 nights, I didn't hear it again. I was getting sick. I didn't know who this person was or why they picked me or my grandfather. But it was real. I don't believe in hallucinations like that, nor do I believe in anything paranormal. This was a real person. After that night, things were quiet for 2 days. No sounds, no movement, nothing. I thought maybe it was finally over. On the third night, I went to bed just after midnight. I didn't stay up this time. I left the hallway light on just in case. At exactly 1:17 a.m., I woke up to a new sound, not whistling, but knocking. Slow, spaced out knocks, 3 of them. They were coming from inside the house from the back door. Then silence. I didn't move. I stayed in bed listening. A minute later, I heard a creak from the floorboard in the hallway. Then another. Someone was walking. The hallway light went out. I grabbed my shotgun, heart pounding, and stepped out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark, but at the end, I saw something. A person in black clothes, pale face. They were standing perfectly still, just watching me. I raised the shotgun, but my hands were shaking. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I raised the shotgun, but my hands were shaking. I screamed, "Don't move," in a shaky voice. I saw, in the dark, the person slowly lifting their leg and turning as if they were about to run. I screamed, "Stop!" And at that moment, they darted out of the hallway, out of my sight. I heard their heavy footsteps stomping out the front door into the dark. I ran outside and fired a shot, not into the air, but straight ahead into the darkness, half hoping I'd hit them. I screamed, "Don't come back!" The shot hurt my ears, ricocheting off the walls of the house and the deck. I locked up the house, got in my truck, and drove into town. I slept in my truck that night. The next morning, Deputy H drove out. The front door to the house was unlocked again. That confirmed whoever it was had a key to my grandfather's house. Nothing was broken or missing, but Deputy H recommended I change the locks. And off the record, he suggested I move out of that old place because someone out in those woods hadn't taken kindly to either my grandfather or me being in that house. I drove to the local home improvement store and switched the locks that day, that same hour. After that, I left the house and went to my parents' house out of state for a while. I left it to my dad to eventually sell the house. Anything of sentimental value we took out. The rest was left or sold. My dad, of course, left out the fact that some creep had been stalking the house for decades. How they got a key, who they were, why my grandfather never said anything, I don't know. It all disturbs me deeply. I think it was some disturbed creep living in a nearby house. I eventually moved to a more urban area. This experience left me too unsettled to live in a remote location. Story 2. Emma's 16 now and live in the city, but I spent the first 8 years of my life in the countryside. For some people, it might seem weird that I was allowed, from a very young age, to walk around the small village without my parents supervising me. The area wasn't very big, population about 90 people max. Everyone knew everyone, to the point that me and my friends remembered the car numbers and who they belonged to. It was a hot summer day. My friend and I, let's call him Julian, were dying for some Coca-Cola. Back then, soda was cheap at the little supermarkets, and we really needed a couple of pennies to buy 2 cans. Luckily, an old woman called us from her house. She said she was making mint tea for everyone since her birthday was coming up. The issue was, she'd run out of mint plants, so she told us if we filled 2 plastic bags with mint leaves, she'd buy us as much soda as we wanted. Julian and I thought it was a great idea. I didn't want to ask my parents for money. Soon after, we started digging. The sun was literally baking our foreheads, and our clothes were soaked in sweat. We searched for mint, but despite our efforts, we barely filled half the first bag. Both of us were mad since we knew there was no way we'd gather enough leaves before sunset. Still, we kept walking and looking, hoping some miracle would happen and we'd find a field full of plants. Suddenly, 2 tall guys approached us out of nowhere. And when I say tall, they were probably 5 feet 7 inches, but to our 7-year-old selves, they seemed like giants. What surprised me most was they were both covered in black clothes, hoodies, and tight pants. Neither looked older than 17, though their faces were hard to make out. They talked to us in a friendly, childish voice, careful not to raise any suspicion. "You kids alone?" Julian looked at me. He seemed worried and made a hand gesture meaning to leave. Unfortunately, body language was never my strong suit, so I didn't get what he wanted. I shifted my attention back to the two guys and, in a cheerful voice, said, "Yeah, we're looking for some mint plants." Then I asked where we could find a bunch of them. We had been looking for so long and were really tired. Now, I'm not sure, but I have a vivid flashback of one of the guys smirking when they heard what we were looking for. One of them crouched next to me and patted my head. Julian quickly came close, pulling me back by the arm when he saw the guy touching me. His expression was serious, almost panicked, and he asked, "Who are your parents?" See, where I come from, that question meant you had to answer with your last name. With so few people and few new generations, asking who your parents were was a common way to identify someone's bloodline. Julian grew up in the countryside, so he knew the people better than me. I assume he was scared because he didn't recognize the two guys, and the fact that they were talking to two small kids without anyone around, even patting my head, instantly set off red flags for him. Just as he feared, they avoided the question, acting like I was their main interest. "Actually, I've seen a big field of mints," one of them said. "See that hill over there? That's where we come from. If you want, we could lead you to the field and help you fill those bags, or even more." Of course, we knew that hill. Julian and I and the other kids used to play hide and seek in its forest at night. It was so much fun, I can't even describe it. But still, I'd never seen any mint field there. All that grew there was corn, grapes, and some watermelons. Again, I was a very naive kid, and all those red flags meant nothing to me. I nodded eagerly, pulling Julian by the arm to come with me. The guys seemed satisfied and started leading the way. We walked further and further from the village, and I could feel my friend's hand trembling in mine. Suddenly, I felt a shiver down my spine as the village disappeared from view. The forest was right in front of us, and there was no trace of any mint field. I tried asking the guys where we were going, but they gave vague answers like, "You'll see," or "Just be patient." I started sweating and slowed my steps. Panic rushed through me, and I realized something bad was going to happen, but for some reason, I couldn't stop walking. I knew if either of us tried to step back, something really bad would happen. Then, quietly, Julian came close to my ear. I still get chills remembering this so vividly. He whispered as silently as he could, "There's something wrong with these two." Run, that was the last thing I heard when Julian began sprinting downhill like crazy, his hand not leaving mine for a second. I ran as if my life depended on it. Probably did. I could hear the two guys curse, then start chasing us. I cried loudly with fear, not stopping. I wasn't even breathing, and I can't understand how I ran nearly 2 kilometers back to the village without stopping or catching my breath. The woman who asked us to gather mint saw us, both covered in tears and sweat. Our faces were pale, as if all the blood had left our bodies in that moment. At some point, as we got closer to the village, the guys must have stopped following. She calmly took us inside and gave us chocolate to feel better. She asked what happened, and Julian told her since I couldn't speak. As soon as he finished, the woman gave us a worried look and scolded us for being so stupid. "Well," scolded Julian, who lied, saying I didn't want to follow them, and he insisted on trusting the guys. After that incident, he wasn't allowed outside to play for a month. While I needed lots of time to recover from the small trauma, I never found out who those guys were or what they wanted. Looking back now, much older, I can guess, and that doesn't sit well with me. While we were running, there was a huge chance I could have tripped and fallen. Running downhill that fast was risky. If it wasn't for Julian, who is now my boyfriend, I don't even want to imagine what those guys would have done to us. Story 3. My parents worked a lot when I was little. Both had 2 jobs because they needed extra support for me and my older brother Cameron. Their jobs kept them busy but meant they were gone most of the time. So they hired a babysitter from a website. She was a young white girl, maybe early 20s, named Michelle. For about 4 to 5 months, Michelle came over every weekday to babysit us. Me, 7, and Cam, 8, we both loved having Michelle around. She was young, polite, and very energetic, which meant we could have a lot of fun playing with her instead of some old lady who was always tired and in a bad mood. Cam and I did online classes because school would have been too hard for my parents to keep up with. Michelle helped a lot with that. When summer came around, my parents told Michelle she should take a break. They wanted her to have a nice vacation, especially after all she'd done for us. But that also meant we didn't have a babysitter for the summer. My parents didn't want to go through the process of finding a new one, so they decided to take Cam and me to our grandparents' house. They lived in Texas, in the countryside, a bit far from our house in Oklahoma, but it was worth the drive since we'd be there all summer. The weekend came, and on Saturday we started our drive. The ride was beautiful, but to little me, it was the most boring, nauseous experience ever. We finally made it to their house after what felt like forever. It was a medium-sized cabin-looking house in the middle of a big open field with woods behind it. Off to the side was a barn-style building with an area for animals, cows, goats, chickens, and other cool stuff. We all said hello, and right away my grandpa wanted to take Cam and me on a little tour. My parents stayed inside talking to my grandma as she cooked dinner. The night was amazing. We got to catch up with Grandma and Grandpa and played a bit with their dog, Cora. When it was time for bed, my brother and I shared a room with a bunk bed and a TV. The room next door was another bedroom where my parents slept. My mom and dad fell asleep fast because they were tired from the drive and had to be home the next day for work on Monday. Cam and I stayed up a bit longer watching cartoons on TV. After a while, we finally went to sleep with the TV on. Around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of footsteps outside my window. Heavy footsteps. I couldn't see anything out there because the window had blinds. The footsteps didn't wake Cam because the TV was still playing, but I could still hear them. Then I heard a weird noise coming from the window, and after 2 seconds, a grunt. Someone was trying to open it. I went to my parents' room to wake them up and tell them. They didn't really believe me and thought it was my imagination, of course, but when they went to check, nothing was there. So they just brushed it off as an animal sound. We were in the middle of nowhere after all, and maybe my kid brain really did think it was something it wasn't. I fell back asleep after 5 minutes of just lying there. In the morning, I woke up to the delicious smell of my grandma cooking breakfast as my parents were packing to go home. We all ate together. Then my parents left. Once they left, my grandpa took Cam and me to feed the animals while walking Cora. I wanted Cora's leash, so my grandpa handed it to me, saying to hold on tight. As we walked along the trail, I had to pull Cora a little bit every 5 seconds. When I finally looked to see why she wasn't walking, I saw her staring at something. She was staring into the woods. I was a little scared to look that way, but when I did, I saw a black figure standing there, staring at us. Even though it was all black, I could tell it was looking at us. It was half behind a tree, hands on the wood as if it were trying to peek over, but with its whole body. I turned to my grandpa to tell him, but him and Cam were already 15 feet ahead of me. I ran to catch up with them while having to pull Cora a bit, but once I told my grandpa about the man in the woods, the man vanished. It was like he'd never been there. I thought I'd have seen him if he'd run off, but where could he have gone? My grandpa had heard about what happened the night before, so me telling him something like that couldn't be me playing tricks. I could tell in his face that he was concerned, but he just told me it was okay and that it was probably a deer in the distance, and that when I ran, I scared it off. After we fed the animals, we went back to their house. We enjoyed the rest of the day watching movies and playing outside in the sprinklers. That night, my grandpa made the best dinner too. There was so much food that after eating, I was really tired. I took a quick 10-minute bath and headed right to my room and Cam's room again. We watched cartoons for a bit and fell asleep. Around 1 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of humming outside the window. It was humming to the theme song of Cyber Chase, the show that was playing. Cam, being a heavy sleeper, didn't wake up to it, and the blinds were over the window, so I couldn't see what it was. But I knew for sure at this point it had to be a person. At first, I thought it was my grandpa outside smoking, and for some reason, he started humming the intro because he heard it through the window. Of course, that was a dumb explanation, but me being the kid I was, I yelled out, "Grandpa!" The humming stopped. After 30 seconds of no sound, I heard, "Hey, it's Grandpa. Come out here, kid. I want to show you something cool." I then put on my shoes and went outside. There were no lights, but I remember how beautiful the night sky looked. I finally got to the window where I saw my grandpa standing. He reached out his hand for me to grab it. I took his hand, and he started leading me toward the barn. I tried talking to him, asking where we were going, but no answer. I started to rethink what was happening. Why would my grandpa be outside at 1 a.m. showing me something cool? Why was he wearing a sweater with the hood up? Then I looked at my grandpa's hand and really paid attention to it, only to realize it wasn't my grandpa's hand. It was the hand of someone much younger. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip only got stronger. I didn't want to let him know I knew something was wrong. So I stayed quiet, even though my heart was pounding. Then I looked behind him and noticed a long handle sticking out of the back of his pants. That's when I really panicked inside. Suddenly, I heard my grandpa's voice calling from the house. I didn't say anything back, but the man turned his head toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, I yanked my hand free and started backing away. The man stood there for a second, then suddenly bolted toward the woods. I ran straight for the house, yelling for help. By the time I got inside, my grandpa was waiting for me with his arms wide open, and my grandma had the phone to the police. Not long after, the cops showed up and started searching the area. They found the man hiding in a ditch not far from the house. In that ditch was some stuff he'd taken from the barn, and most disturbing of all, they said he had an axe tucked into the back of his pants. After further investigation, they found that the lock on my grandpa's shed had been broken off, leaving it open for anyone to get anything they pleased. In the shed were a lot of tools that could have caused more trouble. A couple of days later, my grandpa found out that the man was Michelle's ex-boyfriend. Let's call him Dave. Dave admitted to stalking us and planning to take me that night. He figured it was easier to take a little girl, so he went after me. He said he wanted to take me because he knew Michelle cared about me a lot, and if he had threatened to hurt me, he could make Michelle do anything. Dave said he mainly wanted to use me to get back with Michelle because he wanted to start over and live a happy life with her. He claimed he was never actually going to hurt me. After this whole incident, our parents picked Cam and me up a week later and started looking for better jobs so they could be home with us more often. They also let Michelle go, which is understandable. I am so grateful that the police station wasn't far from my grandparents' house. But most importantly, I'm thankful my grandpa had woken up that night to use the bathroom. Even after 20 years, it still gives me chills to think about what would have happened to me that night.